Movement is a fundamental requirement of both plants and animals. Animals, being heterotrophic, have to move from place to place in search of food. Most plants are autotrophic. They don't need to move from one place to another in search of food. But movement can be observed in plants too. How do plant movements differ from movements in animals? Most animals move from one place to the other. The change in position of an organism as a whole is called locomotion. Whereas the term movement is defined as any change in shape, size or direction of any body parts. Movement is a characteristic feature of all living cells. Animals show both locomotion and movement, whereas plants show only movement. Plant movements are slow and hence can't be observed instantly. But there are a few exceptions. Look at this Venus flytrap plant. The leaf closes instantly when an insect sits on it. Movements in plants are classified into two categories: tropic movements and nastic movements. Let's learn more about movements in plants. Tropic movement is the movement of the plant or any of its parts in the direction of a stimulus. Tropic movements are of different types, depending on the type of stimulus. Phototropism, thigmotropism, chemotropism, geotropism, and hydrotropism are a few examples of tropic movements in plants. Look at this plant. It is kept in a dark room where sunlight is entering through a small window. After some days, one will observe that the plant is bending towards the direction of light. A response of this type to a light stimulus is called phototropism. The plant stem shows positive phototropism, that is, the stem moves towards light. Whereas the root shows negative phototropism because roots grow away from the direction of light. Observe these germinating seeds closely. No matter in what position they are kept, their root grows downward. This type of movement is what we call geotropism or gravitropism. The plant part moves in the direction of the earth or gravity. Roots are positively geotropic, whereas the stem is negatively geotropic. Now observe the growth of the pollen tube inside a flower. What do you observe? The pollen tube is moving towards the ovule. What drives the development of a pollen tube towards the ovule? The ovule releases some chemicals. The pollen tube recognizes these signals and shows a positive response by moving towards the source of the stimulus. When a plant part moves in the direction of a chemical stimulus, we call this movement chemotropism. Now, observe this experimental setup where a plantlet is growing in the soil near a porous water pot placed in the soil. If the plant is not provided with any other source of water, after a few days we will observe that the roots of this plant are moving towards the water pot, the only available water source. This type of movement, where the roots move towards a higher relative level of humidity, is called hydrotropism. Hydrotropism can also be considered as a type of chemotropism in which water is the chemical factor. Observe this creeper. Its tendrils are coiling around the support. Here, the tendrils of the creeper are responding to contact with the solid support and are winding around it. This type of movement, where the plant part moves in response to touch or contact with a solid object, is called thigmotropism. The other type of plant movement is nastic movement. Like tropic movements, nastic movements occur in response to environmental stimuli, but the direction of the response is not decided by the stimulus. Nastic movements are non-directional responses. Photonasty, thigmonasty, and thermonasty are various types of nastic movements in plants. This is Oxalis triangularis, commonly called the false shamrock plant. Observe the movement of its leaves with changing light intensities. The leaves open up in bright light and close at low light intensity. This movement, which is caused by changes in light intensity, but is not in the direction of light, is called photonasty. This is the touch-me-not plant or Mimosa pudica. The leaves of this plant droop down in response to touch. This type of movement, where the plant part moves in response to touch or contact, is called thigmonasty. Look at this Venus flytrap catching an insect. Can you identify what type of movement it is showing? When subjected to a temperature increase of 5 to 10 degrees centigrade, crocus flowers open in a few minutes. This nastic movement in response to a change in temperature is known as thermonasty. So now you know that plants also show different types of movement.